So we'll jump straight over to our guest speaker now, and I'll hand over to Mark.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark Parry. I am a guest speaker for you guys this evening. So I noticed that a few of you are teachers or work in TAFEs, which is great. I have a background as a teacher. So this is my first slide. I'm an instructional designer and a media producer, and I live in Sydney, Australia. And I also teach at a creative media institute and also at a university. I teach primary school teachers how to use technology in their classes. So, and then I also do video production for mainly universities, as they generally turn up as an e-learning resource. So here's my contact details if you want to find out more information about me. So I'm just going to go to this next slide. Now, if you have any questions as I'm talking about equipment that I might use, or I don't know, curriculum issues, or I don't know, suggestions, etc., if you can type them into the discussion panel, then I can either answer them as we go along, or I can answer them at the end. So try and, if you think of a question, get it in early rather than leaving it to the very last minute, because then I'll have to leave in about 15 or 20 minutes, so you can get on with your other activities. So do type in any questions that you might have. Some current projects. This is a screenshot from a current project that I'm working on, and we'll give you the link to this. This is on YouTube. This guy, the guy in the background, he's a researcher in cognitive science, and he works with rugby players, and he attaches microphones to all the rugby players and listens in on what they're talking about when they're playing their game to analyse how effective that might be in their gameplay. So it's basically, it's one example of several in a series I've been working on about cognitive science in the real world. So I'll get a little bit more information out to you in a minute about that project. Here are some other projects that I've been working on, or I'm currently working on. There's a really wide range. So I tend to work with universities mainly. So things like welcome videos. The woman on the top right is a history lecturer. So this was her welcome video. It's probably like a 3-minute, very friendly kind of welcome, very simple, hardly any editing. Whereas the guy in the bottom left, he's an Indigenous Australian man, and we went out into the bush and interviewed him about his upbringing, his childhood. So quite really different. The woman at the top left, she has a very successful web series, an online series. So this was a seminar that she produced, but I'm hoping to interview her soon, but we've got some footage of her at least. And then the people in the middle, the guy at the bottom and right in the middle, they're medical related. So the one with the ears is like a skills. They're demonstrating the skills in how to fit a hearing aid. And then the guy down the bottom, it's more like a lecture about ergonomics and how hospitals might better run or run better. So yeah, I really enjoy the diversity, lots of different topics, lots of different subjects. Now here are some video links. We won't watch these. I'm not going to watch these with you, but these are available. If you click on any one of those, they'll launch in a new window. The one that I was talking about with the rugby players, that's the top link, Cognitive Science in the Real World. But there's other, I tried to just include a diversity of different links that might be of interest to you. And then right down the bottom is a link to one of my own students. He made this really delightful documentary late last year that used a high frame rates filming bees and birds and other animals. So you might want to check that out as well. So these are my two sets of students. I tend to have a very student-centred approach where the students at the Media College, who are the ones on the left, they typically work in a studio setting, and they'll go on hopefully to become media producers or directors, cinematographers, that sort of thing. Whereas the students on the left, they're training to become primary school teachers. So their type of video, when they're producing video, it's just on an iPhone typically. And I think this particular one, this was just shot last week. They had a summer session or the week before. That was life cycles of tadpoles or life cycles of trees or something like that. So there's a huge diversity in people's ability and the skills they bring to this sort of situation. But yeah, it's really clear that anyone can just slot in whatever their skill level, and it definitely video is really, really useful in education. So I've got the old narrative elements of what, why, when, where and how. Think who is me? What do I produce? I tend to produce only educational videos. In other words, I don't do promotional or marketing type videos as such. Why do I do them? It's an extension. I'm a former high school teacher, so I just see this as an extension of me teaching in a way. And sometimes the university lecturers, they don't have a background in education, and they certainly don't have a background in media production. So I find that I can meet their needs really well. And as I said earlier, they generally end up as an e-learning resource. So when do I've been doing this on and off as a freelancer for maybe about 10 years, but I kind of I've been dabbling in this area for many, many years before that then. Where I mentioned that I live in Sydney, Australia, and how, I guess the how is related to maybe the equipment that I use. At the moment I use kind of professional or even semi-professional cameras. I edit in Adobe Premiere and use After Effects as well, Photoshop, that sort of thing. Sometimes I collaborate with the teachers, sometimes they just send me off and I just make it for them. So these are some video projects. I've already mentioned this one on the left, but that was there were 10 in the series. In fact, I just got an email today and they found another person that they want me to interview. But that's been a really interesting project so far. So I'm just in the process of putting a lot of those clips up on YouTube. So I've got a playlist if you check out my website. The one on the right, this guy's teaching primary school teachers how to draw an elephant. And so this was at the Botanic Gardens in Sydney. It's a couple of years ago. So that was more of just pointing the camera at an activity, really. Another one that I've done is this Bostes. If you're a teacher within New South Wales, they have an accreditation body that's linked to the Board of Studies who set the curriculum documents and syllabus. So this is a video on essentially teacher professional development. So lots of interviews and like B-roll cutaways of teachers talking or teachers teaching, that sort of thing. Audiology was an interesting project. This poor woman is struggling to hear in a noisy cafe because it's so echoey. So this was a little intro into one of the videos. So that's one of the links if you want to check that out. It's actually part of a welcome video, so I tend to have that flexibility of I would approach each project in its own way. This is an overview of my process. If you've done any sort of learning design or related activities, you might be familiar with the ADDIE model, which is ADDIE, an acronym. So this is an overview of what I typically stick to. So the analysing phase, we look at documents like a syllabus. Some corporate organisations don't have a syllabus. They might know what they want to have taught or part of their learning. So typically that's the starting point, just to wrap everything around the learning outcomes, and then figure out what media you have available. Who are people camera shy? Are they willing to participate? So that the one with the Indigenous project, that's been really interesting because there's many protocols in that sort of territory. So it's been a little bit different to a typical project. So definitely there's that phase at the beginning. And I mean, these phases you could use with your own learners in terms of, well, we're going to make a video. So the first step, and that's my visual motif of a microscope or a magnifying glass there, just kind of figuring out a plan. So once you've got the plan, then you start with the designing phase, which is the creative aspects of what sort of creative approach. Maybe you might create a prototype. Maybe you might shoot a little bit of footage and see what it looks like and then go out and shoot the rest. Maybe you might delegate all that to your students. Maybe you might do it all. There's lots of different approaches. Then the developing phase is when the actual tasks are completed. So the rest of the filming is done, the editing is done. So this has got a parallels with the pre-production, production, and post-production in video projects. But this one's a bit more inclusive of educational elements. And finally, implementing and evaluating. So, for example, implementing might be publishing it to Vimeo or embedding it into an e-learning resource, that sort of thing. And evaluating, which is sometimes drops off the end, but it's nice to reflect upon how you've done, what you would do differently next time. This is a typical sequence in Premiere. It's a screenshot. So typically, most of the projects I work on have a very short duration. This is just a couple of minutes. But you can see this is a timeline or different video tracks that you're probably familiar with. I've got some B-roll where you can see in the pink there, and that's basically covering an interview of some sort. So this is by far my typical project. Interview with B-roll, a little intro with music, and a little end credits. This is a overview of me, where I came from. I did some study. I was initially a science teacher in high school, but I moved off into TAFE and other areas. Did a TAFE course in multimedia, which was really enjoyable in the late 90s. And then I went on to do further study in media arts and production. I already mentioned how I started, so I might skip that one. So my best work combines learning design with video production. What I do now is I really enjoy working part-time in doing bits and pieces. I find that's quite satisfying. So how do I learn now? I really like tutorials like lynda.com, Adobe TV, other short courses, books, this sort of seminar that you're participating in. I think these are really great to kind of keep up your skills. So where do I have to go next? I think there's a lot of potential still with user-generated content, as in getting learners to generate the content and then the teacher or facilitator brings that in to a resource. And then finally, my creative influences. I learn a lot from colleagues. I learn a lot from my own students and just from professional practice as well. Now, I've sped through that. We're on 7:15. Now, I will see if I can read if anyone's got any questions on... Oh, yes, Romain, yes, you will have access to the slides. They'll be in the archived recorded session. But if you want to skip back through the slides, you can click on some of those links and they'll generate a new tab. So then at least you've kind of got something to look at. I noticed, Romain, you've got a background in medical related education. So yeah, definitely I definitely have worked with doctors at Macquarie University. Lots of interviews with subject matter experts about their findings. I'm interviewing a guy next week about viruses like human viruses and social media, and how information is spread via social media, like anti-vaxxers, that type of thing. So yeah, it's brimming with potential. But if you check out some of those clips in the links, any work with FIRST Robotics. I have worked with the robotics department at Macquarie Uni. That was mainly for an overview of the course and what it offered, how it linked to industry and their work experience, that sort of thing. I'm not sure, Sue, why your capitalisation of FIRST, is that an acronym? Maybe I should know what that is. I'm just going to scroll up to the some of your other
There
questions.
is one other one, Mark. What is the 7x11mm video on one of the slides?
Yes.
So you've mentioned 7x11mm
What is
video.
the what? The 7...
That. A 7x10.
Oh, where is it? 7 by 10 minute. And so typically it's very rare that I do a one-off video. It's 7 of them in the set, and each one of them is 10 minutes long. So that's by far a more pleasing way to approach online video than having one 70-minute video that people will not watch. So you have lots of nice little interesting topics.
What do you think is the longest that an educational video should be?
That's a good question. That's a trick question, I can tell. No, I think it's a really good question, and it comes up all the time. I have a problem if the video is, say, people say, 3 minutes or less, and I think, but why? Why 3 minutes or less? So I typically find a 10-minute, 5 to 10 minutes is manageable. You can get enough information and depth without it being too drawn out. And then I guess it depends on how your learning design structures that within an e-learning course. So, I guess it's kind of, you do hear about these younger learners having short attention spans, but I guess it's kind of this whole long form revival seems to be happening with, especially with podcasts that go for an hour. So, I don't know, I guess it's wrangling the technology, the file size, the upload, all these factors. But for me, I just find that a 10-minute video is satisfying to watch and works for most people.
Does anyone else have questions for Mark?
I'm just scrolling back up, and I've see if I can find any.
I can see someone's typing.
Oh, yes. Yes, about the lesson, uploading the lesson. Giving tasks or questions through a video can extend the time students will be engaged. That's right. Sometimes you do chop it right in the middle, and you have a little trigger question so that they're challenged, or it might extend off into something. They're given a task. Exactly, and that's what Anne is saying. And so I guess it's that's why it's really satisfying to combine essentially learning design, which is not that far removed from teaching anyway, with video production. And so I guess because we're all exposed to television and other stuff, definitely this idea of pressing play and letting it run and then stopping it, that teachers can explore that more mindfully by having prompt questions or little breakout meta narratives, or explaining something, or a little point of reflection with text on screen. There's lots of different opportunities to kind of essentially design the script of your video, which in turn, as Anne is pointing out, it does students will be more engaged, because it's kind of they may not want to just sit and watch something. Especially a talking head can be very boring, and that's something that, unfortunately, with all due respect, university lecturers maybe are still learning about. It's not actually the most engaging way to deliver a lesson. So that's why video really has such a high potential for engagement with lots of different learners. Now, Shani, I'm just looking at the time, and it's very good to see 13 participants. You sort of must have snuck in after the starting time. Oh, Kev has said a very interesting thing. You can look at analytics and you can see where learners have dropped off or viewers have dropped off. In an educational context, you'll find, though, that the learners, if it's linked to an assessment task, then they won't drop off quite as soon. I guess it's the tension that exists, or not tension, but it's the difference between, is it an ad or something that's optional, or is it something that they need to watch? It depends on how it's framed, but yeah, analytics are really valuable. That's linked to the final step in the ADDIE model, which is the evaluation. You might look and see, oh, they're 10 to 15 minute videos, they're stopping the viewing at 7 minutes in. And you can even pinpoint what is it, what is it that's triggering them to turn off. So that's always really good value to, can be potentially confronting if you're a video producer, but, this is all part of lifelong learning. So, being able to adapt and change.
Very true. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, Mark.
Yeah, that's all right. That feels like about a right amount of time. So hopefully it's been interesting. So as I said, you can download these slides or, look at the links later. There's definitely a lot more detail in actually viewing the videos themselves. And then there's my website as well, if you want to check that out, which is on the first slide. That has heaps more info. But thanks very much for, inviting me as a guest speaker in this forum. So hopefully hopefully you'll be creating your own interesting and engaging video projects that you'll share with your own learners.
Okay, we'll just go back to put this back on the screen for a couple of minutes. The link that Mark is talking about, I believe it will be the Parryville Media show reel. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that'll link to the channel, the YouTube channel, and then you'll be able to hop back to my website as such. But yeah, there's all. The one I haven't mentioned, but it's on here, is this Lovesick, that's a little documentary about my own learners and their process of making a music video. So there's layers upon layers of. I guess I'd look for every opportunity to film something that might be useful that then I can use in class or use with a professional development. So it's always a good idea to have a camera or a phone, mobile phone that can capture video on you, just so that you can get into the swing of things, the spirit. Silly question, but is there a ready link for your presentation? Yeah. So that's what we just had on that slide. So you should be able to link from that slide. So thanks again. I'll leave it there.
Thank you once again, Mark.
Enjoy the rest of the session.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.